President. Madam President, I am here today to defend the Environmental Protection Agency's vehicle emission standards, standards that will cut air pollution to tackle the climate crisis, protect public health, and save drivers money at the pump. And these standards for passenger vehicles, cars, SUVs, and light trucks will help us accelerate towards our climate targets and put the brakes on our dependence on fossil fuels. Last year, we imported 8.5 million barrels of oil every single day of petroleum products, including gasoline, while simultaneously exporting more than 10 million barrels importing oil from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Oman. And what does this proposal do that the Republicans want to propound here? It's to say, no, we don't want to move to an electric vehicle future. No, we don't want to in any way send a signal that we are a technological giant as the United States, and we're going to back out that imported oil so that we're not contributing those petrodollars to those nations which are ultimately intent on undermining stability. So this dependence on fossil fuels traded on a global market and imported into our country puts drivers at the whim of OPEC. It puts them at the whim of those who are driven by profiteering, and it allows big oil CEOs to turn drivers upside down at the pump and shake money out of their pockets. Why would we continue this? We're technological giants. We have an all-electric vehicle future, hybrid future for our nation and for the world. Are we going to lean on that or retreat? Because that's what is being proposed here. Gas-guzzling cars aren't just bad for drivers, they are bad for all of us. According to the EPA, the transportation sector accounts for 29% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to global warming, actually the largest single source of climate warming emissions in the United States. And the EPA has a legal statutory responsibility to set strong, clean car standards to help us put this crisis in the rearview mirror. The final clean car rules are estimated to avoid more than 7 billion metric tons of carbon pollution, equivalent to 4 times the emissions from the entire transportation sector. This is the single most significant rule we have ever seen in our fight to tackle the climate crisis, more than any other rule in the history of the United States. That's a big deal. That's something to be proud of, and that's something is worth protecting from political attacks. In addition to building a livable future, this rule will also save lives right now, providing $13 billion in annual health benefits as a result of reduced air pollution. And the Clean Cars rule isn't banning gas cars, but it is expected to help supercharge our already booming sales of hybrid and all-electric vehicles. And these final rules are technically feasible, economically achievable, technologically neutral, increasing vehicle choice for Americans. This means that families and individuals will still be able to choose from a wide range of vehicle options, including more than 100 different plug-in hybrid and battery electric vehicles here in the United States. Automakers are innovating and driving us closer towards a clean energy future. That's why big oil hates these vehicle emission standards. The oil industry is scared to death that $46 billion in reduced annual fuel costs will stay stranded in drivers' pockets instead of in the padded company profits of big oil companies. If you follow the money, it becomes pretty clear why big oil would want to attack these standards. All the Republicans have to do is wait outside and drive the getaway car. And that is why I'm urging my colleagues to vote no on Senator Crapo's legislation, S4072, which would block the EPA from carrying out the final Clean Cars rule. This bill is irresponsible because it undoes and it undermines future regulations that would protect public health. The Clean Cars rule will reduce particulate matter by 95% compared to current standards, prevent 2,500 premature deaths, reduce heat attacks, respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses. But this bill is coming up for a vote. It instead would prevent working families from saving money on gas and maintenance repairs. Over the lifetime of the standards, drivers will save $62 billion in fuel and repair costs, or $6,000 over the life of a car by model year 2032. Rolling back these clean car standards is not an option. We have to protect this rule. We have to protect drivers' budgets. We have to protect public health. We have to protect our climate. That's why a vote on this, of no vote, is so important. And I want to thank everyone who is in this fight. I see Chairman Copper, who is here, and Senator Whitehouse. This is an absolutely critical rule. And I will say this, every day, Donald Trump and Big Oil say, drill, baby, drill. But the young generation is saying, plug in, baby, plug in. We're moving to the future. We're moving to an all-electric future, and that's what this vote is all about today. I urge a no vote on the floor of the Senate.
Madam President.
Senator from California.
I'm inspired by Senator Markey's remarks and pleased to join him in this debate in opposition to the measure. And we're speaking today because the American people deserve to know what is at stake during today's vote. And no, it's not the latest fabricated Republican electric vehicle horror story. No one's coming to slap a Biden bumper sticker on your car and take your gas-powered car off the road. Americans are smarter than that. Americans want a reliable car that can get them to work, to school, wherever they need to go, powered by fuel that doesn't break the bank. Americans also want a future where their kids, our kids, and our grandkids can breathe clean air. And we all want a planet that's not burning to the ground. But unfortunately, too many of our Republican colleagues will tell you that we can't have both, that we have to choose. It's going to be either the economy or the environment. So for everybody who's watching, everybody who's listening, please know that that's a false choice. Yes, the EPA rule will improve public health and protect our planet, but it will also help create good jobs and strengthen the auto industry. It sets ambitious goals for reducing emissions while giving automakers the flexibility that they need, that they've asked for, to actually meet those goals through whatever combination of new electric, hydrogen fuel cell, or hybrid vehicles that they're best prepared to make and offer. So to my Republican colleagues, I also have a question. How many times have we heard you say, well, let's make it in America? Well, here is your chance. Would you welcome more good-paying jobs in Idaho or West Virginia? We do in California because we'd rather have them here and not overseas. I also hear some people argue that, well, our domestic supply chain and our charging infrastructure isn't quite ready for this electric vehicle transition. Well, this rule actually reduces the risks for domestic manufacturers and gives them more certainty to make necessary long-term investments in domestic manufacturing and charging infrastructure that we all want to see. So, colleagues, we have a tremendous economic opportunity before us. And Madam President, I ask them all to just take a look at our home state of California, where we have proven that it's not an either or between the economy and the environment. California has led the nation, not just with bold targets for clean and renewable sources of electricity, but for transitioning to a zero-emission transportation sector. And as a result, clean car sales are now far outpacing even our expectations. In 2023, zero-emission vehicles made up a quarter of all light-duty sales in our state, the most populous state in the nation. If California was its own country, we'd be fourth in the world in electric vehicle sales. So not only can it happen, it is happening. And it's because of that type of economic potential that automakers across the country are fully committed to this electric vehicle transition. They know that this EPA final rule is ambitious, but it's also achievable. And labor unions, including but not limited to the UAW, are all in because they too reject the fear-mongering that says tackling the climate crisis is going to come at the cost of so many union jobs. Environmental and community advocates are all in on this because it's what the climate crisis demands of us. But we still hear Republicans saying that Americans are losing their ability to buy the vehicle of their choice. That's wrong. For all the fear-mongering, for all the bad faith arguments, let's be clear. Under the EPA's rule, not a single American would be forced to buy a car that they don't want, and not a single manufacturer will be given a quota for a specific type of vehicle to make. And with all that said, I will acknowledge that Republicans are correct about one thing. These are big goals for our country. But colleagues, a century ago, it was American innovation and manufacturing that led to the automobile revolution. And it'd be wrong to think that the American people can't do it again. So I urge my colleagues to stand with us, to set ambitious goals for our future, to give the American people a choice, to grow our economy, and we can do it by voting no. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Delaware.
I want to associate myself with the gentleman from California and thank him for his comments. But I rise today in strong opposition to the measure before us. If enacted, this measure would block federal funding for the Environmental Protection Agency's new plan to limit tailpipe emissions from light and medium-duty vehicles such as cars and pickup trucks. Nearly every day we see signs of planet in crisis, wildfires ravaging our lands, polluted air filling our lungs, extreme heat gripping our communities, and much, much more. Scientists have repeatedly sounded the alarm. We are running out of time to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and slow climate change for the health of our planet, and there is no planet B. Instead of coming together to tackle this challenge head-on and create jobs at the same time, some of our colleagues want to stop a rule to limit greenhouse gas emissions, which we know to have substantial warming effect on our planet. So why is it important to tackle emissions from the transportation sector? To explain, let me start with the age-old story about a guy named Willie Sutton, notorious bank robber during the Great Depression. And at his trial, he got arrested, dragged before the court. And his trial, his judge famously asked him, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? And he replied famously, Your Honor, that's where the money is. Well, Madam President and colleagues, we need to continue reining in emissions from the transportation sector because that happens to be where the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States economy is at 28%. Let me say that again. The cars, trucks, and vans we drive each day make up the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in our country. After that, 25% of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. come from our power plants. Another 23% come from our manufacturing operations. Think asphalt plant, think steel mills, and so forth. Combating the climate crisis requires us to use every tool in our toolbox. And it's simply not possible to meet the climate goals we set without addressing emissions from the transportation sector. And this rule helps us do just that. In fact, this rule is expected to avoid over 7 billion tons of CO2 emissions. That's the equivalent of taking every coal plant in America offline for over 6 years. In addition to planet-warning CO2, vehicle emissions also contain what is known as particulate matter. What is that? Well, particulate matter is commonly known as soot, and we know this type of pollution is gravely threatening to human health. In fact, according to the EPA, this rule alone will provide $13 billion, billion with a B, in annual health benefits by preventing heart attacks, respiratory and cardiovascular illnesses, decreased lung function, and premature death. It will help 400,000 people with asthma breathe easier. That's almost half the people of Delaware. So let's be clear. This rule not only helps us drive down greenhouse gas emissions and slow climate change, it also helps us clean up the air that we breathe and protect public health. I also want to take a moment to address the myth that this rule is an EV mandate being thrust upon American consumers. This rule would actually bolster consumer choices when it comes to purchasing new vehicles. And by giving manufacturers flexibilities to use a mixture of technologies, this rule ensures that consumers will have a wider range of vehicle choices, from advanced gasoline vehicles to hybrids to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and a full range of battery-powered vehicles. For years, I drove a 2001 Chrysler Town & Country minivan all over Delaware and around the country. It was lovingly known by a lot of folks in Delaware as the Silver Bullet. And after 600,000 miles, we parted away, and I fell in love with my new vehicle, which happens to be an electric vehicle. Not only is it environmentally friendly, it is a hoot to drive. Now, I was reminded of that just this morning on my drive into the train station in Wilmington, Delaware. In fact, I saved a lot on maintenance as well and fuel costs by switching to an EV. Unlike what some may want you to believe, this rule doesn't force anyone to make the same purchasing decisions that I did. Instead, it gives consumers a wider range of vehicle options that are cleaner, more affordable, and hopefully a whole lot of fun to drive. Let me close with this. A remarkably wide range of groups, including General Motors, Stellantis, Ford, United Auto Workers, the League of Conservation Voters, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and many more, support this rule. Support this rule. It's not every day that we see this kind of coalition formed. In fact, it's rare. But when we do, though, we need to pay attention to it and learn from it. Let me close by saying supporting this bill and blocking EPA's rule would be harmful to human health, to our planet, the economy, and consumers, and that's why I oppose this measure and urge our colleagues to join me and others in opposing it as well. I yield. Let me yield to the Senator from Michigan.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Madam President, I will be brief. I represent the Motor City, Detroit. I represent the men and women who put America on wheels, and we are very, very proud of that, and we continue to do that and to innovate. They are not asking for the repeal of this rule. Our American automobile companies are not asking and do not support it. The United Auto Workers, the men and women who are out there doing the innovations and building the vehicles of today and tomorrow, are not asking for this. They do not want this. You know what they want? They want certainty, economic certainty. They want stability. They have worked with the administration to craft an approach that is rigorous but works for them to get to the next level. So I'm not sure who this is for and what this is all about, but it's certainly not for the automobile industry and the millions of men and women who work for that industry that have created the middle class of this country. Thank you. I yield back.
Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, I'm delighted to join my colleagues here to support the EPA's new tailpipe emission standards. Rhode Island has long ridden along with California on its emission standards, and we're delighted to see EPA follow along with strong anti-pollution emissions standards. Among the many benefits of this is that we'll start to head off climate dangers that we are facing. There are innumerable reports about the economic threats that America faces as a result of unconstrained climate change. I would ask unanimous consent to have the articles from the recent Economist magazine. They open with a lead sort of editorial type article, and then they have the solid full article, and I'd like to ask that both be appended at the end of my remarks. Talking about how climate change—
Without objection, Senator.
Talking about how climate change, to use the article's words, is shaking the foundations of the world's biggest asset class and looking at potentially $25 trillion worth of global economic damage as homes become uninsurable because climate change makes them uninsurable. On the national security front, I'd ask unanimous consent to add to that an article that I wrote with Senator Graham pointing out the danger to the world of the petrostates and how badly behaved they are and how they are propped up with fossil fuel dollars so they can go out and do things like wage war against Israel, invade Ukraine, and saw up correspondence that they don't like. But the real thing is that this will come home for American consumers. The quicker we can get off fossil fuel, the safer Americans will be in their pocketbooks as well. This is the way gasoline prices have looked like for back since 1978. They bounce all over the place. Why do they go all over the place? They go all over the place because the prices are not set by a market. The prices are set by an individual cartel. A cartel of international entities, most of whom are not friends of the United States, that can simply decide to stop production and juice prices. And you can see over and over again where prices have juiced. The last time was immediately after Putin went into Ukraine. On cue, the fossil fuel industry raised prices dramatically. American companies that were not directly affected rode along with the price increase. They just took the international price and they made the biggest profits I think any company has ever seen. So consumers get gouged by an international cartel that manipulates our gasoline prices. We can get off of that with American-made renewable energy from the sun, from the wind, from batteries, from geothermal, from nuclear, you name it. We get off of the international cartel fossil fuel roller coaster, which we do not control. We will never, ever, ever as a country have energy independence while our prices for a product depend on how an international cartel behaves. So this is a really, really important step. As Senator Stabenow said, representing Michigan, the car companies support this, labor unions support this, consumers support this. It's expected to provide $99 billion in net benefits to consumers through 2025, and that includes $46 billion in reduced annual fuel costs. So if you want to know who this benefits and who's on the other side, it's the people who are going to lose $46 billion in polluting, dirty fossil fuel because people have gone to clean, efficient electric vehicles as a matter of their own choice. And last of all, it helps people who breathe. It's estimated to save $13 billion per year in public health benefits. It's hard to put a dollar number on a public health benefit. It's kind of an awkward way to talk about a public health benefit. But when a kid can go to school instead of having to stay home because their asthma has been fired up by atmospheric ozone, when a mom doesn't have to call into work and say, I can't make it today because I can't get my baby to daycare because asthma has kicked in because of pollution-driven atmospheric ozone, the $13 billion, that's just the price of the care. The price in people's hearts and in people's harms is far, far worse. So the benefits of this wildly exceed any cost. This is a great rule that EPA has done, and I support it fully. Thanks very much. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Wyoming, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, good to be here with my friend and colleague who just addressed the body on this legislation. And as I remember, he said, who's going to be on the other side of the position that he has taken? Well, I'm the face of the person who's on the other side. And I'm here with students from Wyoming, 4-H kids who understand from an agriculture standpoint what kind of vehicles families in Wyoming want, need, the freedom to choose the kind of vehicles that they drive, the practicality, what they can afford, what they know will work for them. They're from Sheridan, they're from Gillette, Wyoming, and they are here because they support the freedom to choose what kind of vehicles people want to drive in America. And it's not just Wyoming, it's all across the country. And I want to thank the senator from Idaho who wrote this legislation, because he's the driving force behind this very important bill, of which I am here to support. Look, this legislation that we're talking about today would prohibit any government money from going to fund Joe Biden's obscene attacks against American cars and American trucks. Because every day, people in Wyoming rely on their cars and their trucks to get to work, to get to school, and to do the daily work of our economy: agriculture, ranching, farming. Great distances that people travel in Wyoming, and they need reliability. They need vehicles that they can trust, that they can count on. So this bill today is about defending their freedom, and it's against those who want to take away that freedom. What President Biden and the Democrats are trying to do, Madam President, is trying to force Americans to switch to electric vehicles. Vehicles that many people don't want, can't afford, aren't practical for them in their daily lives. The actions by the Democrats and the EPA aren't driven by facts. They are driven by that party's blind faith in their climate religion, a faith that says we need to prioritize, as the President has told the EPA, prioritize climate over energy for our country that is affordable, available, or reliable. How's that way out? How do people feel about that? Which do you want? You want energy that's affordable, available, reliable? Well, then you're going to be for this piece of legislation that we're talking about today. But for the climate alarmists who continue to come to this floor and harp about the issues, let me point out to them the inconvenient truth. And the inconvenient truth is the American people do not want to buy EVs, and they actually are voting with their feet. They aren't buying electric vehicles. They simply aren't interested in that car or the truck that they know is too expensive, too unreliable, and for them too inconvenient. That's what it's about. The public has absolute legitimate concerns about the lack of charging stations or Look, EV batteries, they lose their charge in the cold of winter. Well, we have longer winters in Wyoming. We also have longer roads to drive to get from work or school to home. And EVs certainly do not inspire confidence. They don't inspire confidence for those of us who live and drive in states like Wyoming or the West, with our cold winters and our long distances. So the President of the United States wants to force the people of Wyoming and across the country to buy EVs anyway. He doesn't care about this. He's from a small state, Delaware. I don't think he has any clear understanding of the vastness of the Rocky Mountain West. I've heard in a number of his comments, and it's clear that he doesn't understand the people who live in the Rocky Mountain West. But Joe Biden does understand that he has had and placed a heavy hand on the EPA so that they can tell us what to buy, what to drive, and I'm against all of these sorts of obligations and mandates. The EPA wants to dictate that 7 of 10 vehicles, new cars sold, need to be electric. By comparison, EVs make up less than 1 in 10 cars being sold today. And what's happened now, Good Friday, late Friday afternoon, and Good Friday right before Easter, new mandates on trucks as well that clearly aren't practical, expensive mandates, unaffordable. They talk about the benefits. The benefits are highly exaggerated. This self-righteous Biden administration imposes punishing, political, and penalizing fines on the car makers who won't comply with their mandates. This isn't right. This Biden car ban, it is bad for consumers, it is bad for the economy, and it is bad for American jobs. Look, if this regulation goes into full effect, the impacts are going to be devastating. Republicans reject all of these unjustified, unnecessary restrictions. Democrats are the party of regulating every room in your home, and now they want to move to the garage after banning gas stoves and natural gas. They want to control our lives. It's coercive. To me, what they're doing is a crusade against consumer choice, convenience, and affordability. The focus in Washington should be on lowering prices, producing more American energy, focusing on energy that's available, affordable, and reliable. And the people of Wyoming and across the West, and we are America's energy powerhouse, breadbasket for American energy. We do it with the kind of respect for the environment that one would expect and want and demand, and we do it that way. We understand what Americans want, and the senator from Idaho's legislation is what we need to do to put Americans not in the back seat, but in the front seat. That's why we're here today talking about this, Madam President. It's so interesting when the EPA, with their truck mandate, they talked about how much carbon they would avoid putting in the atmosphere over the next 30 years. Now, I think their numbers are exaggerated, but the amount that they're talking about putting into the saving from putting in the atmosphere in 30 years is what China and India combined put added into the atmosphere every single year. So the Democrats say, okay, China and India, okay, drill 30 holes in the bottom of the boat. And the U.S. in that time, we're going to patch one of them. Aren't we great? Well, we're not, Madam President, and it is wrong to take away the choice of the American people for what they want, what they can afford, and what's practical in their lives. So thank you, Madam President. I think it's just time to put a stop to Democrats' mandate madness. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from West Virginia.
Madam President, I rise today because I truly want to depoliticize this. I want to give you the facts because I was the one who negotiated the bill with the President. I negotiated the bill with the Speaker of the House. I negotiated this bill with the Majority Leader. So let me give you the facts and depoliticize it. Take the Republican-Democrat equation out of this. This rule should have never happened. It wasn't our intent, and it wasn't what we agreed upon. We shouldn't even be voting down or up on this rule today because it should have never been here. And I'll tell you the reason why. The IRA was designed truly, and we all agreed on, energy security and manufacturing in America. That was it. Energy security and manufacturing. We're producing more energy today than ever in the history of the world. We produce more energy today than anybody else in the world. And they're having a hard time grabbing that, but that was the way we designed the bill, to be an all-in. We're going to do fossil, cleaner and better than anywhere in the world, and more of it. And we're going to do investments in the clean technology for the future, and we've done that. When we put this bill out, the administration knew exactly the timetables. I'm giving you the timetables here, and I can show you how they've accelerated everything because it did not meet their timetable. The deadlines, 2024, 2023, they're going with temporary rules to 2026 and 2027. The reason they're going to temporary rules, you can't sue on temporary rules. You can sue on permanent rules if you've been damaged. Absolutely negating everything that we had in agreement. And so I said this, we tried to basically persuade or bribe the American public to buy an EV. They're a great vehicle. I don't contest that. Only 1.1% of West Virginians want them. We are a market-driven society. We are capitalist. You can't force with government regulations to do things that we've always been trained not to do. Buy what you want. Buy how you want. And that's what they're trying to do. Now, what happened on top of that, then they changed the whole, how we basically, the regulations we all agreed on, the President, the Speaker, and the Majority Leader. We said the first year in 2023, at least 40% of the extracted minerals that we need for critical minerals to build these batteries had to come from the United States or our allies, our trading partners. Our whole goal was basically to eliminate being dependent upon China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. This is the first time, and the lady spoke from Michigan. I love Michigan. I love the vehicles that Michigan has produced. And I can't tell you that every Michiganer has got to be enthralled with what they're trying to do, because they're saying by 2032 that basically 70% of the vehicles have to be electric. You can't do it. Two things why you can't do it, Madam President. First of all, we don't have the infrastructure to do it. Next of all, we don't have the minerals to make the batteries. So the only way they could get around that is to change. You tell me in the bill where it says you can go from 40% to 20% the first year. You tell me in the bill where it says by 2031 you can go from 80% that you should be doing here in America to 40%. You're not going to be beholden to China. We have never been beholden to another country, a foreign supply chain, especially an unreliable foreign supply chain for our mode of transportation. I remember in 1974 we were dependent on oil. We weren't producing the oil we should be producing. We were depending on Saudi Arabia, and OPEC basically put an embargo on us. I waited in line to buy gasoline to go to work. I remember that day very well. It was a horrible time. I sure as heck don't want to have to wait on the battery to come from China to drive my vehicle to work. That's all we're talking about. So this rule should never be here. And when you go through the things, the compromise that we made, own the EVs that were made in North America, and with the batteries that are made and the minerals sourced here, would they get the full $7,500 credit? That was the whole purpose of bringing manufacturing. There was not a quibble. There wasn't saying, oh, I'm not sure we can do that. Everybody agreed. Again, the President of the United States, the Speaker of the House, and the Majority Leader here in the Senate. Totally agreeable. It's wonderful. Now, you tell me if it was so wonderful, why do they have to cut everything in half and basically usurp the intentions of the bill that we passed? That's the reason that I'm standing up today to support getting rid of the rule, because the rule shouldn't even be here. It wasn't something that we agreed on. It wasn't something that we talked about. And then on top of that, they want to make sure that you can't sue with the timelines because they have temporary rules. They want to put the temporary rules out because you can't sue. So we're in a catch-22 here, gang. Forget about being a Democrat or Republican. Be an American. Do the right thing. Let the market do what it does best. The market will decide. The market will basically, if you have a better mousetrap, I'll buy it. But we shouldn't be buying it when we have to be totally reliant on a foreign country of concern. And again, if what we saw that Putin did and weaponized energy for our allies overseas, I tell you that Xi Jinping from China will do the same thing with the critical minerals that we're depending on. And if our transportation mode for our economy, our work, our getting our goods to market is dependent upon him giving us what we need, it ain't going to happen, gang. Why we're going down this path. So, Senator from Idaho, Senator Crapo, my dear friend, thank you for working with us together on this thing to try to bring common sense to it. And it's exactly what we talked about. So, these charts are telling you exactly what happened. I'm telling you exactly how it happened. And if the President was standing here, and if the Speaker of the House was standing here, and if the majority was standing here, they'd all have to agree because they were with me when we made the deal. That was the deal. That I can tell you. That's the facts. And there's nothing else that we can talk about. Why we're even having to vote down a rule that should never be before us makes no sense to me at all. So yes, just do what we said we would do. Bring manufacturing back to America. Bring basically the reliable things that we do and do best here. And make sure that we have the energy that we can produce it. The rate they're going now, if you electrify what they want to, we will not have the energy of the grid or the capacity to handle everything. And then you're going to have people basically having rolling brownouts or blackouts or paying exorbitantly high prices for energy that's absolutely driven by the mistakes that are being made today. I urge everybody in this body, Democrat and Republican alike, to vote yes on this overturning of this rule that is not part of America, not part of what we do. And with that, I thank you, Madam, and I yield the floor, Madam President.
Madam President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Madam President, I am joining my colleagues today in resisting this EV mandate and commend them for attempting to defund this EV mandate. This mandate would require 2/3 of all new vehicles being sold in the United States in 2032 to be electric vehicles. And it is going to be incredibly harmful to our American families, especially low-income families. The cost to consumers is going to be great. The average low-income family spends about $12,000 on a new vehicle or a used vehicle to be able to get around. And frankly, for many families, and especially families in states like mine of Nebraska, this is the pathway out of poverty. Getting that vehicle, spending that $12,000, being able to get to a job, being able to increase your income. That's how American families get to work in states like mine. And we're going to be robbing those families of that opportunity with this EV mandate, harming those low-income families. It's also going to be harmful for families in rural areas. In states like Nebraska, people drive long distances in rural areas to get to work. And right now, for example, you'll look at 99 of our 147 cities don't have a charger. If you're in some of our cities like Bloomfield or Alliance or Valentine, you're 45 minutes from the nearest charging station. That's not practical. Oh, and by the way, guess what? It gets cold in Nebraska. When the temperature drops below 20 degrees, you lose 40% of your charge on an EV. So not only will you not be able to find a charging station, you won't have very much charge to be able to get there. It's harmful for agriculture because you're not going to be able to just pull over on the side of a road if you've got a truck that's hauling cattle and stop in 95-degree heat for 2 or 3 hours. This EV mandate makes no sense. It does not work for vast stretches of this country. Again, I think EVs are cool. They have fast acceleration. And they work in urban areas, like perhaps here on the East Coast. But in states like mine, they're impractical. And my esteemed colleague from West Virginia was talking about how the Biden administration has not thought this through. I said on the Environment and Public Works Committee, I've had the chance to question officials that support this. And let me tell you, they have no plan for the power generation. They have no plan for the transmission. And by the way, just so the American public knows, they're assuming that every EV is charged with 100% renewable energy. And folks, that is a lie. That does not exist anywhere in this country where you can find a state that 100% of their energy comes from renewable energy. The highest state for it is South Dakota at 50%. States on the East Coast are generally single digit as far as the percent of their electricity generated from renewable energy. So they're also billing or selling you a lie. It is not true. So for those reasons, I also urge my colleagues to support this Congressional Review Act, and I want to compliment the senior senators from Idaho and from West Virginia for bringing this attempt to defund this EV mandate. And now that this EV mandate has been published in the Federal Register, the senator from Alaska and I will be bringing another CRA to stop the implementation of this rule as well. Madam President, I yield back my time.
Madam President.
Senator from Idaho.
Madam President, I rise today in support of Senate Bill 4072. I introduced this legislation and pushed for this vote to ensure that no fiscal year 2024 funds can be used to implement, administer, or enforce the Environmental Protection Agency's tailpipe emissions rule. I deeply appreciate the support of the senators who have spoken today. Senator Manchin, a Democrat, made it very clear this is a bipartisan piece of legislation, basically based on the fact that it violates the very deal that was made earlier to help us look at transitioning away from emissions that are harmful to the environment. If we listen to Senator Manchin, he made it very clear that we don't have the capacity to do this right now. He talked about some critical points. Senator Ricketts just pointed out that we don't even have the capacity today to provide the necessary electricity. Let me explain this. I was talking and have talked to a lot of experts, to an expert recently in global warming issues. This person told me that we can have all the electric vehicle mandates we want, but if the load is not clean, then the solution will not be clean. What did that mean? That means if the electricity that we rely on is not made by renewable sources, that the mandate will be ineffective. That's a critical point to be made because today, as has been indicated, our major source of the load is natural gas. The very electricity that is created in this country to utilize on the roads if this mandate goes into place is not going to be the sort of clean load that is necessary for this massive effort to transition to a completely electric vehicle economy. And the damage will be suffered by the American people in many different ways. But one of the critical ways that that damage will be suffered is that whether it is with regard to the critical minerals that are needed, which this administration is not assisting us in helping to improve in the United States and strengthen in the United States, or whether it is based on other aspects of developing that load that they need, the American people will see the problem in our economy, and China will be the beneficiary. It will be China who is the one who can economically accomplish these objectives and send these electric vehicles to us, or the batteries that these electric vehicles require. And China is not working with clean load either. As my colleague from Wyoming talked about, they're putting out unclean load in the terms of this debate every single day at massive amounts higher than ours. So what are we going to do? We're going to make the United States vehicle industry dependent on China. We're going to make the United States citizens who drive cars and trucks dependent on China and reduce our economic independence from China's anti-competitive pressures. That's what this debate really is about. The EPA's rule is the most aggressive form of tailpipe emission standard ever crafted and imposes a de facto electric vehicle mandate on the American people. Under the rule, automakers must decrease their average fleet-wide emissions by more than 50%, down from the current 192 grams of CO2 per mile to just 85 grams per mile in less than 10 years in order to be compliant. The only way that these standards could possibly be met is through the mass production and adoption of electric vehicles, a fact of which the Biden administration and the Biden EPA is well aware. Once again, increasing our reliance on China. The rule effectively regulates gas-powered vehicles, cars and trucks, out of the marketplace, which, make no mistake, is the goal of this administration. As a result of the rule, internal combustion engines, or ICE vehicles, which still represent the overwhelming majority of new car sales in the United States, can make up no more than 30% of the new sales by 2032, if automakers are even able to be compliant with these standards. The rule represents yet another attempt by the Biden administration to use the rulemaking process to force its costly climate agenda on Americans and pick winners or losers in our free market. These emission standards go too far and will restrict affordable vehicle choices for families, harm U.S. businesses, degrade our energy and national security, and hand the keys of our automotive industry over to China, which currently dominates the entire electric vehicle supply chain and has no intention of reducing the carbon intensity of its economy anytime soon. The personal decision of what a consumer chooses to drive should not be made by Washington, let alone by circumventing Congress. I urge my Republican colleagues and my Democrat colleagues to join me in voting yes on this legislation to prevent American taxpayer dollars from being used to implement, administer, or enforce this disastrous EPA rule. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield my time.